Hi, I'm Jenna Childers for Marin Women's Hall of Fame, talking tonight to 1996 honoree Ellen Straus, environmentalist and rancher from West Marin. Ellen, we're so glad to have you with us tonight.
Well, thank you, Jenna.
Tell us a little bit about how that struck you. It's been just a few months now since that lovely evening ceremony where you were inducted into the Hall of Fame. How did that feel?
It felt wonderful. I was very surprised at, I knew I had been nominated, but I had no idea that I even had the slightest bit of a chance. I thought it was just, kind of pro forma. I never thought about it. And when I got the phone call, I was overwhelmed, really.
Well, you were nominated by many people and nominated strongly, and for good reason. You have been in Marin County for a long time, about...
Since 1950, 46 years.
And you didn't, you weren't exactly born and raised here. You had kind of a long journey getting here.
Yes, I was born in Amsterdam, Holland. And my family, that's where my parents and my brother and sister and I, we lived through the rise of Hitler. And my mother, who was born in Germany, went back to bury her last relative in 1939. And she came back from Germany and said to my father, "We've got to get the children to safety because Hitler will come all over Europe and it will be very, very bad." And so my father went down to Rotterdam, to the American consul, and he stood in line all day to try and get a visa. It was very difficult to get a visa at that time. It was all up to the consul. There were quotas, and usually the quota was already filled. So when my father got to the American consul, the consul asked him, "Why do you want to immigrate to the United States?" And so my father told him, I'm Jewish, I'm afraid for my wife and my children, I want to get them to safety. And so the American consul said to him, "You're the first person today who's told me the truth." Because it wasn't good form to say these things. But my father was a very truthful man. And that's how we got our visa to come to the United States. Oh. And it saved our lives.
You were about 13 when you came to the United States.
That's right.
So you have some memories of those years before you made the trip.
I do. There was a lot of conversation at the dinner table about what was happening in Europe, the Spanish Civil War, the rise of Hitler, and so on. But I was still very young.
You were very young. What would you say was the effect on your life? A young girl going through such a dramatic and very difficult time.
I don't know, it's kind of when you grow up, you kind of take things that happen to you kind of in stride. But it certainly had a big effect on me because we had to leave our home, which I dearly loved. I had to leave my friends. Came to a strange country whose language I did not know. Went to school right away. I think it made me very conscious of trying in the future to prevent something like that happening ever again. I mean, it was so terrible. Mm-hmm. And I could not understand why my parents and their generation had not been able to stop Hitler.
Yeah. So it leaves you with a certain sense of resolve. Were there some people in those early years as you came to America and learned to speak English and went to school that were influences on your young life?
Yes, I think so. Well, first of all, my parents were a great influence on me, of course. I think I admired my parents very much. My father had a great influence on me. He was a man who always was never afraid to tell it the way it was. And he was very independent. He didn't go with the crowd. He also had a very good friend who turned out to be very much of a role model for me. His best friend was a naturalist who worked at the Amsterdam Zoo and was responsible for keeping the animals happy. And all the animals knew him. He got to be very well known. And after the war, I stayed in his home at the zoo, which was a 17th century little house. And I went with him to the University of Amsterdam and listened to him lecture on animals. And he had a radio show every week. And everybody in Amsterdam knew about the radio show. Everybody would listen every week to this radio show, which was called Which Animal Am I? And every week was another animal he talked about.
Which animal am I? That's great.
Yes.
So you didn't grow up on a farm when you were a young girl,
No,
did you?
I did
But you
not.
had
I lived
this.
in the central part of the city of Amsterdam.
But you had this exposure to a man who
Yes.
lived at the zoo.
Yes.
And maybe those were the earliest influences on you?
Yes, and my father loved birds. And we would go on walks on Sundays. We could go anywhere we wanted to. And at that time, Amsterdam was a small city, relatively small. Within half an hour, we were outside the city. And so we used to take long walks. And there were lots of birds. And there was, it was just beautiful.
So your love of nature and the environment goes way back.
Yes, it does.
Way back. It's interesting to me that the word environmentalist, which is how we refer to you now, is kind of a new word. In the days in the 50s, when you and your husband came to West Marin, it was called conservationist.
That's right. I remember the first organization that my husband joined was the Marin Conservation League.
And how was it that you made the trip from New York City, where you met and married your husband, out all the way across the country and moved into Marin?
My husband actually came to New York City to meet me. He was a dairy rancher here. He had come from Germany he had trained for agriculture because he grew up as a Jew in Germany, and they were much more aware what the rise of Hitler meant. And so he prepared to go to Palestine. And so he trained for agriculture in Czechoslovakia and in Holland. And then he went to Palestine. And it's a long story, but he had roots also in California. His mother was born in California, but had gone back as a child to Germany. And so he came on a visit here in 1936, and he stayed, and he studied at Berkeley and Davis. And finally, he got some jobs, and he milked some cows at the Point Reyes Peninsula, one of the farms there. And then he bought the home ranch in 1941, just before the war broke out with America. And
in 1950, you and he, William is his name, right?
Yes, well, I call him Bill. We were introduced by a family. And he came to New York twice to meet me. The first time I wasn't there. The second time I wasn't there either, but I was on a slow boat from Amsterdam to New York. Oh. And so he stayed around and we met.
That was in 1950. Yes. And you came right away after you were married to West Marin.
Oh yes, we spent our honeymoon, as the local paper said, on the beautiful shores of Tamales Bay.
And how was it that you came from being a young bride, just new to this part of the country, to getting involved in conservation issues?
Well, actually, in the beginning, I didn't get involved in conservation issues. I was so involved, really, in trying to do something about the world. And I decided I would be active in politics. So I went to a local meeting, and before I knew it, I was member of the Marin Democratic Central Committee. And I was that from 1956 to 1970. But I couldn't prevent anything. I had no influence. And I really didn't, I didn't feel that I was really doing things that I could accomplish. And in the meantime, I saw what was happening to the farms in Marin County. And I was very concerned about that. When they tried to do a West Marin master plan, they tried to put freeways near us, when they were talking about actually bisecting our farm, when they talked about putting the highest density on our farm because our farm had the least slope. They did it just, I was very alarmed, and we fought that. And then in 1970 I decided that I really should concentrate on preservation, conservation, and environment. And so I did not run anymore for the Democratic Central Committee. And I concentrated on things that I thought I could accomplish at home.
Yes, you saw a place where you could make a tangible
difference.
Yes.
Yes.
So it started in the 60s, and there were a couple of movements to pave West Marin, to put
Yes.
freeways there and to divide up the farmland.
Yes, as a matter of fact, the West Marin Master Plan, which was, I guess, formulated in the 60s, never mentioned agriculture. And housing was supposed to be about the density. I think the density we fought for at the time, the pros and the cons were one wanted a house in 1.1 acres and the other one wanted a house in 0.8 acres. So we would have had 50,000 homes in West Marin, and agriculture was not so considered important.
Hard to imagine now, but in the 1960s, people thought, the ranchers thought, that this was pretty much a fait accompli. That
they thought you couldn't stop progress, and progress meant subdivision.
during that very active period of your life, you had 4 children.
Yes.
And many organizational ties.
Yes.
Maybe chief among them would be the Marin Agricultural Land Trust.
Yeah, well, that didn't happen till about, well, we started working in that in 1978. And Phyllis Faber and I started this thought. And we got help from Trust for Public Land, we got encouragement from Nature Conservancy, we got everybody together, government, Farm Bureau, environmental organizations, and we worked on it for 2 years. Although it was easy to start a land trust, what we wanted really was for the ranchers to start a land trust.
We should probably say a little bit about what a land trust is. You were trying to protect the land.
Well, the idea was that there are a lot of land trusts in the United States, and most of them up to then were focused on protecting open space, like Nature Conservancy and so on. There were land trusts even on the East Coast that protected little greens, commons, and so on. And it just occurred to me that if you can protect open space, you should be able to protect another resource, very important resource, agricultural land, which was not recognized at the time as being an important resource.
And by now, all these many years later, you've been very successful in doing that. How many?
We have, the Land Trust has protected 25,500 acres in Marin County in perpetuity.
And that's a large percentage of land.
That's about 20% of the privately owned land of probably 100 acres and more.
Very successful.
Yeah. Yes, but the work isn't done yet. We still have a long way to go.
Yes. Are there particular projects that you're looking forward to in that?
Yes, we have to raise some money to do projects, and so we are trying to figure out a program to do that.
There's always more to do, but I'm just thinking about the big things you've accomplished. The Point Reyes National Seashore.
Well,
you were one of the early supporters of that, one of the few ranchers who would speak out in favor.
That's true.
Of that.
That's true. Yes, we thought it was very important.
Yes, and I'm thinking too of those years, the 60s and the 70s, when it was a little bit uphill for you. You were not the typical dairy rancher in West Marin, were you?
No. Neither my husband nor I were born on a ranch. My husband came from a large city, Hamburg, Germany. And I came from Amsterdam and New York City. I lived 10 years in New York City. So you cannot really make up very easily the generations of experience that other ranchers have. So we made a lot of mistakes, and but we enjoyed it. We enjoyed the challenge.
You've learned so much about dairy ranching in 46 years.
Yes.
Now, I understand that your dairy, your creamery, is the only creamery in the western part of the United States to be organic, certified organic.
Well, we were the first. We're not the only ones anymore. We're the only creamery, well, no, not the only creamery. We're the only, we and another dairy which ships their milk to us are the only dairies right now which are organic in California. The land has to be certified organic, which means you don't use pesticides for at least 3 years on the land and no chemical fertilizers. After you've done the land, you have to convert the cows. And the cows have to get certified organic feed from land that is certified. So that is, I think that was the major thing, because it's very expensive to buy certified organic feed.
And just say a little bit maybe about It is expensive, it is complicated, it's not just an easy thing to do. Why
No.
is it? Why do you see that it's an important thing to do?
Well, we don't know what's going on. We know that more diseases have come up. You find more cancer, breast cancer in Marin County. We don't know why. And I can't tell you why either, but it has to do with air pollution, but it has nothing to do with the environment and it's just genetic. We don't know, but we certainly know that we are not growing things like we used to, that we have introduced a lot of chemicals into our food supply. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to minimize that.
Tell me a little bit about how it was to raise 4 children in the middle of all this activity.
Well, that was my biggest goal in life, is to raise a family. I always wanted to have a family. And it wasn't that easy, because it took 5 years before we had our first child. 1955, our oldest son Albert was born. And then we had our daughter Vivian, and then another daughter Miriam, and then our youngest son Michael. So I think we were isolated. I think all the children will tell you they felt a little bit isolated on the farm. We had to drive them everywhere, so every one of them got their driver's license the day that they turned 16. So they wouldn't be dependent on their mother anymore to drive them everywhere. It was really pretty embarrassing. But it was also wonderful because, they got, on a farm you feel so responsible. The kids always felt that they needed, that they were needed. In other words, there were always tasks to do, and
they were needed.
Yes, they were needed,
yeah.
And that's very nice, I think.
And how about you?
And then my husband was always home too, which was very nice to grow up in a farm. I think must be wonderful. I would have loved my father to be home all the time. Maybe my children don't think the same way, but for me it was nice too, as a wife and mother. I mean,
there was more togetherness in your family.
There's more togetherness, and we raised our children together. So.
Mm-hmm. And so when you look back on those years, do you remember a kind of a pull between your activities that were taking a good deal of your time and also wanting to be with your children?
I think my primary responsibility was to my family. And I tried to balance that. I mean, I was lucky that I didn't have to go out and work. So I still am very grateful for that.
You didn't have to go out and work, but we should be very quick to say that you stayed in and worked. How many acres for your?
We have altogether about 660 acres.
660.
Yeah. Yes.
That seems huge.
It is.
And when you first moved there, you must have thought it was huge.
Yeah, well, when we first moved there, we had the home ranch, which was 166 acres, and right after we married, we started leasing a grade A dairy, they call it, which was much bigger. And today we have both ranches.
When you look forward to the 90s and to the new century, what kind of advice would you have for other young women coming along wanting to do the kind of work that you've done?
Oh, I think really all you have to do is really be interested, really be passionate about the things you believe in and want to do something, and then you just go and do it. There's no easy way of doing things, I think, but it's much easier than you think it is. Because I think people go with you if you really believe in something, and you try and get the skills you need on the way. Mm-hmm. But nobody should ever be discouraged from doing anything they want to do.
There's a lot of perseverance in your story.
Well,
when you look back on your life story, there's a lot of stick-to-itiveness.
Well, it meant a lot to me. I didn't want to leave the farm, and I was told that I couldn't stop progress, and that I better move. And I said, no, I've moved enough in my life. I'm going to fight for this.
Well, I know you don't want to be remembered as the woman who stopped progress, but we could remember the work you've done as the woman who kept West Marin from being paved over.
Well, I helped in it, and I'm very glad I had the opportunity to do that.
Ellen, you played a very important role. As you look toward the future, you said that fundraising is an issue. Are there still threats against
Western
Marin?
Yes, there are always threats. you know, we haven't protected all the land there that should be protected, or we would like to protect. So I think, you know, we constantly have to think of new ways of doing it, of getting more people involved in making more friends that understand. I mean, one of the things that our land trust is doing now is it has a lot of tours right now, and it will also go anywhere to speak about the land trust and what it's doing. We think that we need to get more people on the farms because there are fewer and fewer relatives. I mean, at one time everybody had a relative who was, you know, was a farmer. Today that's not true anymore, and it's you take things for granted that milk comes from, you know, the udder of a cow, but children don't think so. Children think they come from the supermarket in a carton.
Right.
And they don't really understand about animals, about the plants, about the interrelationship between the earth and us. So there's a lot to be done.
Yes. The educational work that you've been doing now for so many years, that continues.
Yes, we love to have children come out. We love to have classes come out. We love to have any age group come out. Because we think, first of all, we enjoy meeting everybody because people are interesting. And whether they live in the urban area or on the farms, you know, if you get to know somebody, you feel enriched by that. And so we love to give tours, but we are limited, of course, on how many we can do and still run an operation like a dairy. But so we try to have it pretty open, and if groups call up, we give a tour.
And you've been doing that for some time? You've had hundreds of children out.
I suppose so. I've never counted.
Yes. And if they were going to come now, if a group of children came next week to visit you, you would show them the milking of the cows? We have it pretty down pat now. They usually come in the morning sometime, and we show them the calves, and we talk a little bit, and then we help them. Then we take cream and they make butter. And then sometimes we make ice cream, and they have their lunch on our lawn. And then we go over to the milking, because milking starts in the afternoon at 12:30. And so they can all see the milking. They can see the cows in the corrals or out in the field. And then I usually try to have a tractor available so they can climb and see what it's like to be on a tractor. That's usually that. And of course, if they're older, then we have more discussion about the environment, about the waste management of a dairy, about reusing everything we have, about water conservation, about the bay, about the dangers that we might spill something into the bay and how we try to prevent that, about our crops, how we try to grow some of our crops. Well, a lot of things can come up. There's so many things that children need to learn, and not just children either. Right. Well, when I think about your childhood, which we mentioned a little bit ago, and some of your frustrations, your passion for wanting to make a difference, it seems to me that you have lived a life that has really made a difference. It must be very satisfying to look back on those years.
Well, I'm glad of the things that I was able to accomplish, and I'm very grateful for the life I've had here. I mean, it looked very bleak in the 30s and 40s, and I never dreamt that I would be living on a farm and being able to do these things and raise a family like I hear. I mean,
when you were a young girl, one of your girlfriends referred to you as a living question mark, is that right?
That's right.
And are you still a living question mark, and what does that mean?
I hope so. I don't want to be predictable. I don't want to be predictable. I want to be independent. I want to be independent in thought. I don't want anybody to think that they can just control what I think or what I do. I don't know whether that's very nice or not, but to me that's the essence of freedom. To be able to think independently and act independently and not be afraid.